Apple is going to use Google Gemini for the big Siri revamp, but it's not what you think. Verizon had a big outage and how they responded is questionable. Apple dropped a controversial new Creator Studio subscription and people are freaking out. Interesting new details on the upcoming iPhone Fold and more, all in today's episode of Apple Weekly. Okay, so let's start with the biggest story of the week by far, and that is the fact that we now have official confirmation that Apple will be using Google Gemini to power the next big revamp of Siri, or Siri 2.0 as some people are calling it. However, like I said in the intro, it's not exactly what it seems. And a lot of people are thinking that Apple is just going to throw Google Gemini onto the iPhone and call it a day. But that's not exactly what's happening. But let's rewind. Let's start from the top here. So we heard a few months back that Apple was going to be using Google Gemini as the underlying framework for the revamped Siri. And now we have official confirmation via a joint statement by Google and Apple that they published right here. And you can see it says this: Apple and Google have entered into a multi-year collaboration under which the next generation of Apple Foundation models will be based on Google's Gemini models and cloud technology. These models will help power future Apple Intelligence features, including a more personalized Siri coming later this year. After careful evaluation, Apple determined that Google's AI technology provides the most capable foundation for Apple Foundation models and is excited about the innovative new experiences it will unlock for Apple users. Apple Intelligence will continue to run on Apple devices and private cloud compute while maintaining Apple's industry-leading privacy standards. And that last paragraph is key because a lot of people, for some reason, like I said in the intro, seem to think that Apple is just going to throw Google Gemini onto the iPhone and call it a day, and that's it. But that's not what's going on here. So Apple is going to be using a customized version of Gemini. So Apple is going to be setting their own parameters so it fits, and molds perfectly to Apple devices. And more importantly, most importantly, is that it's also going to run through the private cloud compute. That way everything is secure, everything is private, and Apple can really control, what data is sent where. So things are going to stay on device, it's going to be secure, just like what we saw with the ChatGPT integration, the ChatGPT add-on that we saw previously added in iOS. Now this is very different from that because this is actually going to be powering Siri 2.0, the new next generation of Siri, not just an extension like we saw with ChatGPT, but it's still going to be running through, Apple's private cloud compute like that did as well. And if you're like me, you're probably wondering about the numbers, like how much is Apple paying Google or how much is Google paying Apple? Like what's going on here? Because we didn't actually see a official announcement for these numbers or what's actually going on. However, we did see a report from the Financial Times that says this: the deal would be structured in the form of a cloud computing contract, which would lead Apple to paying several $billions to Google over time. And then Gene Munster from Deepwater Asset Management, he estimated that the Gemini contract could be worth $5 billion for Google. And he also chimed in on the ChatGPT integration saying this: I think that the ChatGPT integration is going to die on the vine. Having two large models, given the economies of scale, wouldn't make a ton of sense for Apple. So it will be pretty interesting to see how these two play together. I think, ChatGPT might be getting thrown to the side for a while now, especially if you've used Gemini versus ChatGPT lately. At least for me personally, I think Gemini is better than ChatGPT in a lot of areas, at least the areas that I use it in. I've been very impressed with Gemini. So also, if you're wondering when this is actually going to be released, because we've heard about this for quite some time now, we're still expecting to see this revamped Siri in iOS 26.4, which should be coming this spring, most likely in March or April, and we should be seeing the betas go out for 26.4 relatively soon, within the next few weeks. And keep in mind, the main reason that Apple is, going with Gemini right now is to buy themselves more time while they're preparing their own version of like a Gemini, something that's more advanced and more sophisticated, more like, ChatGPT and Google Gemini and all the others out there. So Apple's still working on that. It seems like Apple is always late, and it's kind of annoying how late they are to all these things, but they do always seem to get it right. So I don't envision Gemini powering Siri very long term, like maybe a couple of years, maybe not even a couple of years. We'll have to wait and see. But we did also see a report from Ming-Chi Kuo after this broke talking about this. So he says this: Apple is facing two short-term challenges in its in-house AI development that are effectively pushing it towards partnering with Google. Number one, this year's WWDC AI showcase cannot afford another disappointment. And number two, as cloud AI continues to advance, user expectations have risen to a point where even fully delivering on past promises around Apple Intelligence and Siri may no longer be enough. creating an urgent need for a more powerful on-device AI model. And then he also says this, while on-device AI isn't expected to drive hardware shipments in the near term, this partnership helps Apple relieve short-term pressure from multiple fronts. That said, it's only a matter of time before AI becomes central to hardware, the OS, and the overall user experience. Over the long run, Apple still faces the challenge of gaining stronger control over its core AI technologies. And then number 3, Tesla's FSD is a clear example of AI becoming the core of both the device and the user experience. If Tesla's FSD algorithms came from other vendors, its competitive advantage and its valuation multiple would almost certainly be lower than they are today. And then finally, Apple's in-house AI server chips are expected to enter mass production in the second half of this year, with its own data centers planned to come online next year in 2027. This likely means Apple's demand for on-device AI could start to grow more meaningfully from 2027 onwards. So again, it does seem like Apple is just partnering with Google here and using the Gemini framework, the underlying, foundation, just to get them by for the next year or two until they have their own solution, which, that's going to be very interesting to see kind of how that plays out over the next few years, because they will be late, but will they be better? Because Gemini is pretty impressive, I have to say. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. And of course, good old Elon Musk did also chime in on this whole, deal with Google and Apple. And he said this on Twitter or X, this seems like an unreasonable concentration of power for Google, given that they also have Android and Chrome. Also this week, there was a pretty decent sized outage for Verizon in the US. So if you had Verizon on Wednesday, you may have seen SOS in your, status bar on your iPhone indicating that you no longer had service. There was a temporary outage in the US affecting hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of customers. So according to Down Detector, there was about 1.5 million reports of their service being down. That's around 1% of Verizon's total US customer base. And if you did have your service go down, Verizon is offering you a $20 credit. Or if you talk to a live agent, you can get that bumped up to $50. And people were already mad at Verizon for having this, outage, but people got even more mad. People got furious when they saw that Verizon was offering them $20 credits, for their next bill. So, if I've learned anything from the past 2 decades being on the internet, I've learned that when these companies use money as a way to say sorry, it almost always backfires, because people are always going to say, look at the valuation of this company. Look how much money they make. Why are they only giving me $20? It never goes over well. So I'm actually kind of surprised that Verizon did something like this to give money when they should know better by now, that when you give money, it almost always is more negative for the person, because like, oh, what am I going to do with $20? My bill is $150, so people are always going to complain. So it's interesting to see that they did go that route. They apologized and they offered that small credit. Now, speaking of people being furious, let's talk about Apple's new subscription bundle service called Apple Creator Studio. So we heard about this. We've been hearing about this for months now. We didn't know exactly what it was, but Apple just made it official this week. And what it is, it's a bundle of applications. We have Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, Pixelmator Pro, Motion, Compressor, and Main Stage, along with new AI features and keynote pages and numbers, all bundled together for one subscription price of $13 a month or $130 a year. Now, I have to admit, when I saw this, I started panicking because I thought I was going to start having to pay monthly for my Final Cut Pro, application that I purchased like 10 years ago for a one-time fee. So I thought Apple was going to take the Adobe route and make me start paying a subscription to use something I bought, standalone years ago. But thankfully, Apple did not do that. You still will be able to use your one-time purchase, products, your applications that you had before without buying into the subscription. And actually, as a matter of fact, Apple still offers a one-time purchase for these applications as well, which is really good to see, especially if you're like me, somebody with Final Cut Pro. However, you won't be getting all of the new features if you don't have the subscription. This is where people started getting mad again, and I started getting kind of upset as well, because I'm going to get FOMO, because if you have the subscription, you will get access to the intelligent features, the more AI-based features. Even if you have, Final Cut Pro the one time, you won't get access to these AI intelligent features until you subscribe to the subscription, the Creator Studio. So that's a little bit unfortunate. I will be missing out on that because I'm not going to pay for the subscription when I have all these products, purchased as a one-time purchase. I've had them for years, but that is something to know. Also for Keynote, Pages, and Numbers, those are all going to remain free still, but you will have to have the subscription if you want, access to the AI features that are included in those applications. And this launches on January 28th. So what do you guys think about this? I'm really curious. Are you having subscription fatigue? Do you think this is a good deal? Do you think it's a bad deal? What are your thoughts overall on this bundle? And the next thing, it's not the only reason people were mad about this, because there was also something else. A lot of people got really upset at the new icons, the new app icons for the applications in this bundle, because they're all different from the application icons that we had previously. So you can see here a comparison of the previous icons versus the icons in the Apple Creator Studio. So I have to admit, the previous icons definitely had more character. They definitely seemed more alive and creative. But yeah, people just were upset. There's just a lot of emotions about this Creator Studio. So I really want to know what you think down in the comments below, because I'm kind of in the middle on this stuff right now. Now let's talk about another subscription service, and that is Spotify. So if you're like me and you're an Apple Music subscriber, you don't have to worry about this, but Spotify users, you're going to be seeing your third price increase in less than 3 years. So yes, just this week, we saw Spotify announce another price increase. So the individual plan is going to go from $12 to $13 a month, and the student plan is going to go from $6 to $7 a month. And then the duo and the family plans both increased by $2 a month. And I know you're getting subscription fatigue just from listening to me talk about these subscriptions, but let me also just mention one more thing about OpenAI and ChatGPT, because they also this week announced a new subscription, ChatGPT Go. This is a cheaper subscription to ChatGPT. This is $8 a month, and it will give you 10 times more messages than the free version, along with 10 times more file uploads and image creations than the free tier. And you also have longer memory and a longer context window. So that's interesting. Now also, this is even more interesting. OpenAI is announcing ads. So ads are coming soon to the free and Go versions of ChatGPT. So that's right. When you're typing in ChatGPT now, you're going to start seeing ads pop up. And I have to admit, when I first heard this, I thought this was going to be like a huge turnoff of ChatGPT if you're using the free version. But to be honest, they actually don't look bad. They're kind of streamlined in there, and they look a lot better than I thought they would look. But, it's still interesting to see ads coming to ChatGPT. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, are we going to get an ad blocker for ChatGPT? Who knows? And then let's talk about the iPhone Fold. This is easily the most anticipated Apple product in the past several years. So we're now hearing new rumors about this. I feel like every week we hear a new rumor about this, but we have some new details that it's going to be built with liquid metal and improved titanium. So we're hearing this from Yo's1122 on Weibo. He said this, and keep in mind, this is a bit of broken English here since it did have to get translated, but he says the content of the Apple iPhone Fold model is back. The hinge is going to be liquid metal material. The main body is going to be titanium, and it says it's going to have improved strength compared to the material in the existing iPhones. By changing the alloy composition and process, the weight is reduced compared to the overall same area. And keep in mind, the hinge is perhaps the most important, element of the design of the iPhone Fold. That's where we might be seeing, if we're going to have a crease or not. It's all going to be contingent on that hinge and the materials that are used. So this all sounds good, but I guess we'll have to wait and see when it comes out, how well it's actually going to feel. It seems like it's going to be really premium feeling. It kind of reminds me of the Apple Vision Pro when I'm hearing these details about how much quality, just the top tier materials that are going into this iPhone Fold. So it's definitely going to be expensive. Maybe not as expensive as like the Vision Pro compared to like the Meta Quest, but it is going to be expensive, but it seems like it's going to feel like it's expensive as well. Now we also saw an update on the new emoji that are coming out in September of this year. So we just saw these get posted by Emojipedia. So they showed 19 emoji candidates under the consideration for Emoji 18.0, which is expected to be finalized in September of this year. So you can see these right here. We have a squinting face emoji. We have a left and a right thumb that are pointing. We have a pickle, a lighthouse, a meteor, an eraser, and a net with a handle. And keep in mind, we will also have new emojis coming in iOS 26.4. So these emojis right here that were just posted, these are going to be coming in iOS 27.4. Now also this week, we did see Apple release iOS 26.3 Beta 2 to registered developers and to public beta testers. Now iOS 26.3 is a pretty minor update. It's actually a very minor update as usual, because the 0.2 and the 0.4 updates are always big updates. So 26.3, really small update. There's really not a lot going on here. One thing I did want to mention, and I mentioned this in my What's New video, is that if you go into settings notifications, you'll notice that the message or the notification forwarding feature has been removed. So if you wanted to forward notifications to a non-Apple Watch, smartwatch, you were able to do that in beta 1, but you can't do that here in beta 2, at least not on US devices, because it seems like this is going to be an EU exclusive feature. So it's not showing up here unless you're in the EU. So just keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned messages there, briefly. Let's talk about messages because there is also something different here in iOS 26.3 beta 2, but not on the front end. This is actually in the back end because we saw that there is mentions in the code of a new carrier bundle setting that's going to let carriers enable and disable end-to-end encryption for RCS messages. So we've heard about this for quite some time. We knew this was coming, but now it looks like it is actually in the code on the back end in 26.3. So we should be seeing this officially launch. We should have end-to-end encryption for RCS messages once 26.3 officially launches to the public. And then also if we head into our settings and go into the general tab and then down here to transfer or reset iPhone, at the bottom we do have transfer to Androids. This is also a new feature in iOS 26.3 where you will be able to transfer data from an iPhone to an Android or vice versa, much easier, and you will also be able to transfer more data than before as well. So this is new here, and I will be showing a full demo of this once 26.3 officially launches. I will show that, with an actual Android device, but just know that is a new feature here as well. And if you have the AirPods Pro 3, there was also a new firmware update this week for you, and the firmware version is 8B34. So if you do have the AirPods Pro 3rd generation, the latest model, you would have received that new firmware update this week. Most likely it happened automatically without you even knowing, but Apple also didn't say that anything has been changed with this, and I have been using it and testing it, and I've not noticed anything that's different. It seems like there's a lot of placebo, with these updates, but usually nothing actually changes from update to update. It's really just back-end bug fixes and other things that aren't really very noticeable, unless Apple mentions it, which they don't ever mention it. It just says bug fixes and improvements. That's it. That's all they put in the release notes. Anyways, as far as the performance and the battery life goes on iOS 26.3 beta 2, I did run a quick Geekbench test here. You can see what we scored compared to the previous runs there. Nothing too impressive, nothing too noteworthy to talk about with performance or with battery life. I'm honestly not noticing much of a difference at all from 26.2. So, there's really not much to talk about here. I don't want to spend too much time talking about performance and battery life. Also, issues like bugs and bug fixes. I've been looking at your guys' comments. I've been looking at Reddit. I've been looking at Discord. There's really not a lot of bugs going on either. So I have heard some bugs, but it seems like the same people are reporting the same bugs every single version. It doesn't really seem like there's a lot, that's going on in terms of bugs with 26.2, which is actually a pretty good sign. At least nothing that's super widespread. But if that's not the case, if you want to make your case for something, let me know in a comment down below, what issues you are currently facing. But at this point, I think all eyes are on iOS 26.4 beta 1 and iOS 26.4, the final release. But before we talk about that, I do want to talk about what's next for iOS 26.3. So next up is going to be beta 3 for iOS 26.3. We could even see the RC as early as next week. So Monday is a holiday, so we might be seeing that on Tuesday the 20th. We could either see beta 3 or the RC, one of the two. And if we get beta 3 next week, we should get the RC the final week of January. And that means that we would see the final release of iOS 26.3 on that first week of February, or we could be seeing the final release on that last week of January for 26.3. And then we should be seeing iOS 26.4 beta 1. Those betas start in early February, and we should see the final official release for iOS 26.4, the big update, one of the biggest updates to iOS 26, maybe the biggest update that will be coming at some point in March, potentially even in early April, depending on how long that beta cycle is, since it will be with the new Siri in there, the new Google Gemini powered Siri. So Apple may need to do, more beta testing on that, but that is yet to be determined. And then of course I have had people ask me about iOS 26.2.1, like, are we going to see a 26.2.1 actually get released? And that's still a possibility. I think if it was going to get released, it would have to be next week on the week of January 19th. So if we don't see 26.2.1 next week, I don't think we're going to see it at all. And just keep in mind, that's a small update anyways. It's just going to be for security patches and bug fixes, and that's it. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time, a man in California tracked down his stolen belongings with an AirTag, only to be told by the police that they couldn't do much about it. So here's what happened. So one day, this man in California was away at a holiday party, and his house was burglarized for the second time within a year. And the security footage showed 3 masked suspects climbing over a wall, breaking through a glass door, and ransacking the home. So when the man got back home that night, before he watched the security footage, he immediately knew that something was wrong before even checking that footage, because the French doors were shattered again. And I say again because just a few months prior, more sophisticated thieves had already hit his house and they jammed his Wi-Fi and stole nearly everything of value. But this time, there wasn't much left to take. However, the man did notice something strange. So he had a briefcase that was sitting on the bed with a laptop and an iPad inside, but the thieves sat the laptop and the iPad aside and they stole the briefcase, likely because they didn't want to be tracked because they knew those Apple devices could be tracked. However, there was actually an AirTag inside of that briefcase. So the man opened up the Find My application and saw that the location was still active and the people were just 2 blocks away. The thieves were just 2 blocks away. So since he already had, a police report filed, he decided to call the Los Angeles Police Department and he hoped that the officers could help him recover his stolen items quickly. But that excitement didn't last very long because police told him that the AirTag was pinging inside of an apartment complex, and because that it wasn't a single family home or clearly moving in public, they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't search for it. The officers explained that AirTags only give a general location, and without a specific unit, searching multiple apartments would violate other residents' rights. So since the police couldn't do anything about it, the homeowner has just sat there and watched the AirTag continue to move, hopping from one apartment building to another across the city. And while he says that he doesn't even care much about getting his things back anymore, what really bothers him is that nobody is being caught. He believes that the lack of consequences is exactly why these crimes keep happening, not just to him, but to the entire neighborhood. So yeah, that is pretty frustrating to have an AirTag tracking something that got stolen and the police can't do anything about it because it's an apartment complex and they don't really have the exact, unit number for that. So maybe the AirTag 2 can do something better about that. I'm not really too sure, but that seems like a really, a big loophole. If you were to steal something, just go to an apartment complex and you're basically safe. So really interesting, but also really frustrating to know that even if you put an AirTag on something, it's not always a guarantee that you'll get it back. Anyways, guys, that is the first Apple Weekly for 2026. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I have been changing things up a little bit and I will continue to tweak things here on the channel throughout the year. So keep it locked for that. And if you guys have any opinions or any thoughts about any of the changes I'll be making to my channel and my videos throughout this year, feel free to let me know down in a comment below. I'll likely be doing a live stream very soon as well, just to kind of talk about my vision for the channel and what I want to do on this channel as well. You'll start to notice a lot of small changes, and you guys can feel free to tell me if you hate it, if you like it. I'm always open to hearing what you guys have to say, because I really listen to you guys and I take it into account and I take it very serious. But if you guys enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up and just let me know all your thoughts down there and in the comments below. But anyways, guys, I'll see you soon.